And I will open the meeting with an advisory that I have to read as this is a public meeting. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be able to be found on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel following the meeting. This meeting is obviously happening via Zoom. The reference information for the Zoom meeting is included on the posted agenda. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and those that are reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. There are no votes scheduled for tonight. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. I am Peter Beardmore. I am a school committee member and appointed member from the school committee of the Athletic Advisory Committee. Bear with me while I admit additional people here. Joining me this evening are Kevin Bigelow, who is our athletic director, and Dr. Susan Gilson, who is our Director of Administration and Finance for the Lunenburg School District. The primary reason for tonight's meeting, and first of all, thank you for joining us tonight. I was a little bit concerned that this meeting would be comprised of Susan and Kevin and myself, and we would record it for YouTube, but there would not be great participation. So I'm thrilled that we have a dozen or so people in addition to us that are on the call this evening. And we're looking forward to discussing the principal agenda item, which is the proposed change in user athletic fees. Before we get started, though, I just want to kind of give everybody a bit of an introduction for the forum that we're in tonight. School committee policy calls for an athletic advisory committee, which includes permanent members that are myself, a member of the school committee, and the athletic director. And frequent participants, permanent participants are typically the heads of and officers of the booster clubs. But anybody can participate in and give feedback through the athletic advisory committee to the school committee and administration at any time, and we certainly welcome you to do so. In the past, the athletic advisory committee has met approximately quarterly with the primary agenda item to approve fundraising efforts run by the booster clubs for fundraising in the schools. Earlier this year, we agreed that we would take that approval to a virtual approval that is largely consists of Kevin and myself, but that the athletic advisory committee would be putting on an annual meeting and circulating topics and soliciting feedback for that meeting that will occur every year round about the end of summer. So please be on the lookout for that. We are also responsible for maintaining a roster of booster clubs and booster club leadership. I can tell you that that is a difficult thing to do. And so if you are involved in the leadership of a booster club, and neither Kevin or I might not know that you are involved in that, please reach out to us and let us know so that we can make sure that we are effectively communicating with you, which in full transparency, we may not be. And so we're looking to rectify that to the best of our ability. So that's effectively that in terms of the athletic advisory committee. Obviously, principal amongst our responsibilities is to bring feedback to the school committee for policy and budgetary action. And that is principally why we are here tonight. Over the course of the last year, I know that many of you are probably familiar with the struggle that we went through with the current fiscal year budget and getting to that budget, the override campaign that led to that, which some of the members of this call were involved in the leadership of that campaign effort. and the continual budget struggles that that we are saddled with. And that is partially because of inflation, partially because of the revenue limitations that are put on us by statute by Proposition 2.5, and partly due to the lagging contribution that is made by the state through the form of Chapter 70 funds that funds about 40-ish% of our total operating budget, but is growing at a substantially lower pace than our costs. And as a result of that, we have a systematic budgetary challenge in Lunenburg that we are constantly looking to overcome. And Dr. Gilson will brief some of those issues that we are faced with right now. But I can tell you that this is part of an ongoing dialogue that started many months ago. The school committee asked the administration to look at user fees, and these are fees relating to athletics. There are also fees relating to student activity fees at the middle school and the high school. And we have begun to collect that feedback, and at least one proposal that Dr. Gilson is going to outline tonight. We are expecting an additional proposal with respect to activity fees. And this is all going to work into the construct of our total budget, which we ultimately need to arrive at in early March, so that it can be presented to the Finance Committee and ultimately make its way to town meeting in early May. So that is the timeline that we're on. I can tell you at a high level that the ends are not meeting from a budgetary standpoint. We received a high-level briefing by Dr. Gilson and the superintendent at our last meeting, and our projected costs for next year and our revenue base that we're confident in for next year are about $4 million apart right now. We expect that they are going to come much closer together over the course of the coming weeks as our costs and revenue sources become a little bit more clear, but they're not going to come all the way together. And we are going to have some very challenging budgetary decisions to make over the course of the next several weeks. And this fee structure will be part of that discussion. So with no further ado, the way out we'll run this is I'm going to ask Dr. Gilson to walk us through the background and proposal itself. And then really my intent is to open the field for questions and commentary. And I don't want to take up all night. I just got back from work and haven't had dinner yet. But I do want to, the point here is to bring back feedback and commentary. And we're more than happy to give everybody a little bit of time. The school committee standard is 3 minutes. If you can keep it to that, that would be fantastic. But we also want to certainly have the opportunity to air out answers to your questions as well. So I will be the judge and jury when it comes to timing for the question and answer and commentary section. So with that, Kevin, do you have anything to add before we jump into Dr. Gilson's presentation?
I don't. Just likewise, glad to see everybody on this call right now. Looking forward to answering some questions.
All right, Dr. Gilson.
Thank you. First of all, I want to welcome everybody here tonight. I'm a parent myself. I know what it's like to do nighttime meetings. I also have a high school student who is actively involved in the sports program. So I understand what it is like. There is no such thing as a good budget. And there are some times that are more challenging than others. And so the purpose tonight, as Peter mentioned, is to present one proposal and grow to understand what questions people might have. So I also want to mention part of the budgetary challenges have been a 7.6% rise in transportation costs, an increase this year in coaching stipends at 2.5% higher. Next year, that stipend increase for coaches will go up to 4.4%. We also have the Massachusetts Athletic Association that has recommended raising official fees, which we have implemented this year. And as I had talked to Mr. Bigelow, I am learning that we need to remain competitive with the amount that we are paying to our officials. Other towns are much better positioned to pay more than the typical recommended fee. So with that, I'm going to share basically the presentation on the user fee proposal. So understand, let's see. Oh, here we go. So we're very proud of the Blue Knights accomplishments. Mr. Bigelow can share because some of these accomplishments really describe his tenure here across all sports, and we're very pleased with the comprehensive amount of sports that we're able to offer to our kids in Lunenburg. I asked Mr. Bigelow to come up with an average that students are occupied and really working hard in this sports. And the fall, winter, and spring, there are about anywhere from 12 to 10 to 14 weeks of sports season. And there is instruction that is going on, and that's part of the high school program. And we're delighted that we're able to offer middle school sports. Practices generally run 3 times a week for 2 hours a day. And again, seasons can go from 10 weeks to 12 weeks and have a number of instructional time that's offered by our coaches. The purpose of user fees are really to offset the costs of running a sports program. So these costs can include expenses such as coaching stipends, equipment and uniforms to purchase, maintain, and replace them, facility maintenance for athletic fields, transportation, travel time to go to away games and meets, paying referees, umpires, and event staff, and cover other operational costs such as insurance, league fees, and medical staff. The current user fees right now are structured so that at the high school is set at full pay at $250, and that's for the first student in the family. Middle school fees are set at $200. Again, we offer different breaks based on the number of students in your family that are participating. And we also do offer reduced fees and fee waivers as needed based on appropriate documentation that's provided, suggesting the need. We have looked into fee comparisons across the districts that are in the Midwatch Interscholastic Athletic Association League. We've looked at that in relation to looking at our current fees. Fees in neighbor towns that we truly ended up focusing in on. We ended up looking at Ayer Shirley, and Ayer Shirley appears to be offering a differentiated fee for the different sports. And Bromfield we looked at, and the challenge with Bromfield is while their fee is set around $300, they do not seem to have a comprehensive sports program as we do. The challenge that we talked about in Groton Dunstable is while they offer $600 per sport per season with a $1,500 family cap, what we've noticed is based on communication amongst athletic directors is that's a steep fee per season, and we're mindful of what our neighbors are asking of their families. The athletic budget really is funded by 2 sources. One is what we pay within the local district budget. And we looked at the data from last year, and basically we spent every single penny in the local expense budget. And then we looked at, we have the user fees, which we consider, and the user fees that are coming in, and gate receipts are our total revenue that is coming into one of the accounts called our revolving account. And so what we have been noticing is that the amount of money coming in from user fees and gate receipts is not necessarily equaling the money that we're expending on the school sports program. And matter of fact, by the end of last year, the revolving account actually went into the negative. And when that happens, we look to reclassify charges. We had a couple of unfilled positions, and so we looked to balance the budget. And then the other thing that we are noticing is that with the increases in transportation, official fee costs, and coaches' stipends, that we really needed to think of this in a better way. Based on the amount of user fees that were coming in, based on our participation last year, we noticed that we're taking in about $133,000 each year. And not everyone is able to pay the full amount, and we try to be sensitive to family needs. Now, the current athletic fees, again, here's the breakdown. This is what we're charging. What we're noticing is the user fees are offsetting athletic expenses by about 26%, okay? And so the challenge that we're faced with is that the fees continue to increase. And as I said, transportation is going up 7.6% next year. Coaching this year, the stipends went up 2.5%. And next year, they're going up another 4%. And so we took a look at the total participation of the high school students and the middle school students. And if we were taking in full pay with the user fees, we'd make or take in $154,000. At the high school, if everybody was paying in full pay, we take in $39,000, and totaling max total would be about $193,000. So, but the actual revenue, because families have more than one child that want to play sports, the actual income levels of families are different. So the maximum revenue we took in last year was $133,000 approximately. The athletic program cost to run is about $512,000. It's at the bottom of the screen right there. And I think that, as I said, these are the cost increases that we're facing. There is no good budget, and we are trying to be responsible and supportive of maintaining an excellent academic program. And we're also trying to be responsible in terms of maintaining a very comprehensive athletic program. We're having some challenges with that. So looking at the neighboring towns, Ayer Shirley, Groton Dunstable, and the Bromfield School, and also looking at the school district's feeling of responsibility that we need to be making sure that our programs are equitable and accessible to our students. We have priced out what it would take if we continued to fund athletics at the same 26% with the fee increases. And what we came up with was looking at this is a proposal, and the proposal is basically to raise fees per sports season by $75 at full pay. And looking at the breakdown, there's a 25% sibling reduction, and there's a 50% reduction in the 50% discount for students who are reduced. And then we're looking at supporting families who have multiple kids in their family that really get a lot out of the sports program and putting in a family cap across the 3 sports seasons. So with that, we basically took a look at how much we would generate if every student was a full pay student at $325 and $275. Our maximum total that we would bring in with a raise in the fee structure was $254,000 and $650 and change. Again, reminder, the user fees, not everybody pays in full. So we're keeping the expense total with the increases. We were challenged. We needed to bring in this year or next year in user fees at least $136,000 or close to $137,000. And so we tried to make a projection that way. And again, we haven't separated out. We know that we're trying to be equitable and accessible to all of our families, which really would not involve like pricing out sports differently. And so this is our challenge, and we're turning to you for your feedback. And we're looking at how do we support our athletic programs with rising costs for transportation, coaching stipends, and officials, and athletic equipment and other services. And conversely, our academic programs are also being challenged with rising costs for transportation, stipends, official and not officials, but programmatic expenses. And so we're trying to make sure that we're being responsible and realistic in terms of our budgeting practices to make sure that we are doing our very best to meet the education needs of all of our students. So I will open the floor up to any questions that people might like to ask. Kevin or Peter, if you if you're interested and can respond to some of them, that would be certainly great. I'll respond as much as I am able.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Gilson. A comment and then an ask from the people who are on the call here. So first of all, please keep in mind that your school committee is made up of 5 elected members, 4 of whom are parents of students in the Lunenburg School Department. I myself am the parent of a 3-sport athlete and pay these fees and drop into all the Booster Club fundraisers and everything else. So I can tell you that I certainly have an understanding for the amount. All of our financial situations are different, so I can't say I have an understanding for the effect that these fees have on any given family. But that is why we solicit feedback. I would also just one additional piece of context here. There's been some discussion about, particularly when it comes to families that pay full freight for a fee versus families that receive a reduced or waived fee. Where's the equity there? If I'm a parent who pays the full freight, am I not only paying for my kid's portion, but for some other kid's portion?
No, Peter, I'll stop you there because the school district is absorbing the rest of those expenses.
Yep.
So that's the trade-off there. And we're trying to find a reasonable balance if we can, so that the academics for all the students are funded appropriately, and so the sports expenses are also funded appropriately. So that's why this is not the only proposal, this is a proposal, and it would continue to fund athletics at the same level that the collective group of parents has done in the past with the existing budget.
Okay, thank you. So there are a couple of questions that have appeared in the chat, and I would certainly entertain questions in the chat. They're fairly straightforward, so I will take them and answer them as best I can. And then I would ask members of the audience who are interested in providing or asking questions or providing feedback to use the raise hand feature, and I will call on you, hopefully in order if that feature is up and running. If not, I'll do my level best. So Leah Jacobs asked, are there proposals to increase fees in other extracurriculars as well, or is it only athletics? Very good question. We have received on the school committee at a meeting November or December, we received a briefing relative to fees at extracurricular fees at the middle school and the high school. There are absolutely some issues with those, and we have requested a proposal from administration to come back and potentially look at adjusting those fees as well. There are a variety of issues, not the least of which is similar issues around cost. But there are other issues there. This specific proposal and this committee, the Athletic Advisory Committee, is only relative to the athletic fee proposal. And that is really all we have to go on tonight because that's the only proposal in front of us. Kim Murphy asked, is the $1,500 cap per family a yearly cap? I believe it is. Is that
Yes,
correct,
it's a
Gabrielle?
yearly cap. It's not per sports season.
Okay, and is that per family or per kid yearly? I believe it would be per family, right? Because if
Per
you
family,
extrapolate
yes.
the 325.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
mean, it's again, we're looking for feedback and we're just stepping forward because we're trying to do the best we can for all the students.
Okay. I see questions coming in on the chat, and I do see hands raised, and I'm going to try to get to both. So, is it Andrea? I believe you had your hand up first. Why don't you unmute yourself and jump in?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Can, yes.
I don't know. I'm just like tuning in. I don't really haven't been following this much, but I do have two kids. Both of them are going to be middle school next year. Both involved in sports, all 3 seasons, and also in music and science Olympiad and all sorts of other things. And I was just doing a quick add up on if both kids are doing sports and all the other after school things, after school music and everything, it would total my family about $275 a month for all 3 seasons for the activities they're doing now, and assuming they both play sports. And that's kind of just a big amount of money for, I don't know, school activities. It's a big monthly expense for just a family of 2 kids. And I can't imagine families who have more than that. It's a lot. But just watching the presentation and everything, like the first thing coming to my mind is like the transportation seems like the biggest problem. And it's like $40,000 for transportation. Why doesn't Lunenburg invest in a bus? Or like, so they don't have to keeping up with that D-bus service. And then also the differential costs that some of the other towns were doing that you were talking about. My daughter participates in cross country and she loves that program, but she only participated in 4 meets. So $275 for her to run 4 times in a season. I don't know if that would balance out to be equitable for that specific sport compared to field hockey, which had maybe 15 games or more. So I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No, I gather both of your questions. I want to take them in order. I'm going to bring this to Mr. Bigelow and I have a thought on the busing topic because that has been kicked around quite a bit, but I'll let Mr. Bigelow take a stab at both of those questions and then I'll provide a bit of commentary.
Well, I mean, yes, every sport is it's gonna vary dependent on the schedule, right? Like, that's our league schedule for middle school cross country, similar to that of a league schedule for varsity cross country as well too. You know, football plays once a week. Field hockey might play two or three times a week. So that I'd have to, ask Susan in the business office and say like, is that equitable? I guess it is, because you're still getting the same amount of time in instruction throughout the week. But, you know, I, I don't know how you want to look at it. And then the busing thing, that I have brought that up, and I do think that there is an option to save some money and a few different ideas on that end. I just think that we're at the beginning of that process, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. So the busing issue is one that has evolved quite a bit over the last couple of years, with the pricing really spiking over the last 2 to 3 years. One idea that was, I also chair, because of nothing better to do with my time, I chair the capital planning committee in the town of Lunenburg as the school committee representative. And one of the ideas that administration brought forth the capital planning committee, not for the current fiscal, but for an out year, is the possibility of investing in a 15-passenger van, or maybe even two, that could potentially offset, in particular, the lower density transportation requirements that we have. Or a good example is we send a bus to the Reggie Lewis Center for a track meet. We bring out 30 or 40 kids. The bus sits there for 7 or 8 hours and brings back 5 or 6, because a lot of kids go back with their parents after their events, and it costs us hundreds of dollars. And there are possibilities where we could save there. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The problem is, first of all, getting the capital to make the investment. Now we're in a battle of town capital costs versus school department operating costs, and I can tell you it'll make your hair hurt trying to figure out how to equitably figure that out. But beyond that, there are additional regulatory requirements and insurance requirements and everything else that we would need to figure out, and we're just on the cusp of really looking at that. A bus, for example, it's been a little while since I priced one out, but I did it about a year ago when we went through the last budget process. A bus is a $250,000 piece of equipment. And a school bus, I believe, has a regulatory life cycle, I want to say about 7 years before we have to take it off the road. So while D-Bus is very expensive, their amortized cost for their equipment and their drivers and their insurance is actually, once you start to do the math, buses are expensive, no matter how you pay for it. And so I think that there are avenues that we can pursue that can save us some costs there. But I don't think that there's any panacea there, unfortunately. Okay, I believe Chris Martin's had his hand up then, and then I'll go to a couple of chat questions. Chris?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So I guess this question's more towards Dr. Gilson. So on your presentation there, on one of the pages, one of the very last pages you showed a breakdown of what we make at the current price and with everybody paying, and then you also showed a box of what we'd make at the new price. And I think the current price, it was like $133,000. And at the new price, it's $136,000. Is that correct?
Yes, that is, that would be what we would need to make to at least get the same level of offset.
Okay.
And, and that's what we're also factoring in, Chris, is that we're recognizing that the number of families with low income needs within the past 10 years has it's risen, and like at Turkey Hill, for example, the low income rate just hit 30%. So while, it's, as I said, the school district is absorbing costs, but what we're finding is that, we have quite a spectrum of people paying at different levels due to need or due to number of siblings in the family.
Okay, well, so I guess the continuation of my question was, if we had a perfect world and all 616 high school students paid the extra $75, that's $42,000. So if 100 students paid the extra $75, so that gives you 516 students at reduced cost. That's $7,500. So that $7,500 is twice of what you're asking to make up. I guess what I'm trying to find out is a 30% increase in cost is a huge hit for a 1-year cost, right? So you went from $250 to $325. That's a 30% increase in cost for one student in a year. That is a huge jump. Would it be better off to take it in smaller chunks, right? So how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. So would it be better to have a smaller increase year one and a smaller increase year two and so on down the line, instead of this huge 30% increase for what you're saying you only want to make up $3,000 on a $133,000 budget?
Well, Chris, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying potentially for level service, that's what we would have to approximate. We can also, like, there's looking at, we're trying to do our best to provide and create a balanced budget that is also supporting academics, which is the full, which is it's a top priority in the school district. And it's a top priority of the school committee to provide for academic needs for each and every student. But it's also, we still want to maintain a comprehensive athletic program too. So there are trade-offs. And I think this thing that we're struggling with, Chris, is that, user fees have not, Peter, have user fees been raised in the last 7 years at all?
Yeah, that was actually a question that somebody put in the chat.
Right.
My knowledge, they have not been increased in about 7 or 8 years.
Okay, but so the parents of today should not pay for the sins of the parents of the past. So I guess my next question is,
well, sir, it might interrupt you for just a moment.
go ahead.
I don't think that is the proposal. I think the proposal is not to pay for the sins of the past. It's to pay what is an equitable or fair share moving forward.
Okay.
There's two different ways to look at this problem. The problem, though, I think you have accurately touched upon it, is that we have not adjusted these fees at all for quite some time, and as a result of that, it is very impactful if you make a giant step. And I completely agree with you there, as somebody who's going to pay it right along with you, right? So I agree with you, but I don't think that the characterization of this as paying for the sins of the past is really what's been done. In fact, the local budget has picked up the difference over the course of the last several years.
All right. So then one last statement, I'll get off and I'll let someone else ask questions. So right now you're saying that the $3,000 will put us still at 26%, which would then still cause the annual budget to either increase a little bit or stay at the same thing. So to me, it almost sounds like you're trying to get the parental payment to lessen the annual budget so you can take the money out of the annual budget and spend it elsewhere. And I don't know if that's fair and equitable to the parents of the sports students.
Well, again, Chris, I appreciate everything you're saying. I think that, while costs are rising in athletics, so are they rising as we try to provide for the academic, the learning needs of every kid every day. And, we're trying to make some really, as Peter said at the beginning, we're having to make some really tough decisions. And we're trying to be realistic. We're trying to be responsible. And we're willing to hear every single idea that's out there. So So we appreciate everybody being on the call tonight, and the plan will be to take this feedback back to the school committee, and we can continue to evaluate that in the context of the total budget. And again, it's about trying to balance and create the best academic and athletic program that we can for the dollars that we have.
I want to move along to some questions that have landed in the chat, and then I'll get back into the folks who have raised their hands on the Zoom. Somebody asked, where can I find the stipend rates, or the price of stipends? And then also, so let me answer that first. That stipends are stipulated, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Gilson, as part of our collective bargaining agreement with the LEA. And there's quite a bit of language governing how we go about hiring coaches and paying stipends, and the interplay with the members of the LEA. But those rates are stipulated as part of the LEA contract, and I believe are published as part of that contract, and we can certainly make that available. Correct? Dr. Gilson?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Absolutely correct.
Okay. Second question on that was, how much are we paying sports officials? Are they asking for more, or are we looking for better officials? I can tell you, as somebody who's rather vocal on the sidelines, I'm always open to better officiating. Sorry, editorial comment. But Mr. Bigelow, maybe you could comment on the costs associated with officials.
Yeah, so I'm in my third year here, and each year the MIA kind of comes out with a recommended price per official per sport, and that's gone up $2 each year since I've been here. And then the league, which we're in the mid-watch, will interview assigners, and we kind of, through that interview process, we tell them how much we're paying them, which has been, the MIA recommended price. And that's just kind of how it works. We could technically, as a league, but we have 26 schools in our league, say, hey, we're going to pay you a little bit less, but I don't think that would work out in our favor. Or some leagues, I think, out east have gone to the extent of paying more. But where we are in the mid-watch, we pay the recommended amount put out by the MIA.
Okay. Somebody asked, have we looked at grants yet? If we have that many low-income families in town unable to pay, grants may help offset the increase, so as not to put it on the parents that are paying the full rate. I think we addressed the burden on the parents paying the full rate, but Dr. Gilson or Mr. Bigelow, do either of you have a thought relative to the availability of grants when it comes to sports participation?
To be frank, I have not seen any grants, and I would be certainly open. I am aware of, grants for academic programs that do fund, offers differences in priorities based on your number or your percentage of low-income students. But I'm not aware of any for athletics. Mr. Bigelow, are you?
No, I'm not. The only ones that I'm aware of is when for instance, flag football, girls flag football came about a couple of years ago, and there was a grant. I believe it was through the New England Patriots and Air Shirley. We have a few of our female athletes playing on the Air Shirley team as a co-op, and that was done under a grant. But other than that, I do not.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn this over, ask for a question from Chris Sullivan, who has his hand up.
Did Vi leave? Vi's hand was up before me.
I'm sorry, say again?
Vi Brown's hand was up before mine. I didn't know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is she still here? I know she's still here.
I saw her and then I lost her. So if you're still
She
there,
might have,
Diane,
she might have left.
I apologize. Please pass along my apologies if we lost her. Chris.
So yeah, Chris Sullivan, 108 Highland Street. Um, First, thank you, Peter. Going back and watch, I didn't watch the meeting live, but watching the meeting on the 8th, I do appreciate you right away advocating for this kind of meeting and getting this input. So I really appreciate that. So thank you. My question, I guess, is more general. I kind of posted this in an email to you this last night with Kevin. The word equity can mean different things, and so I think the more everybody can understand all of the costs that go into each sport, and that's a challenge I get, and it's kind of but understanding what those costs are to better understand the equity that goes into things might make this more palatable on the surface. As a parent, I'm a soccer parent, I'm a track parent, I'm a golf parent, and I'm a ski team parent. And so, trying to understand what goes into each sport. Ski team is new to us this year. There is no bus. There's one coach. It's a hybrid. There's 4 schools involved with the team. So I don't know the costs that go into something like that, and what that looks like. Golf, we have one coach. There is a bus. I'm sure there's green fees. I don't know what else goes into things like that. Soccer, we have coaches, obviously, and there's busing there. Track, there's busing there. We have a bunch of coaches. But trying to understand all the nuances of the ins and outs of the different things that go into each sport from an equity standpoint. Again, on the surface, I look at it, I kind of, I default to that sort of price it by sport based on what is, goes into that sport. The busing thing aside, I mean, we're kind of stuck on the busing thing. Just as an aside, D-Bus has a monopoly, unfortunately. There's nothing we're going to really be able to do about that. I don't know that there's another bus company in the area that we can comparatively shop against. But that just my 2 cents. If there's a means of understanding some of those things better, it might be helpful to parents as we continue down this path to understand what are all the costs that go into each of these sports. Everyone understands busing, everyone understands referees, but I'm sure there's additional costs that we don't know, and that might make things a little more palatable. I think we do need to pay our coaches better, and I'd like to hear that we're increasing those fees. I think that's important. I'm the son of 2 referees as well. I mean, I'm the parent of 2 referees as well, excuse me. And so I get the need to pay our referees as well. It's a daunting task, even at a younger youth sport level. And so, I think there are things here that justify what we need to do here. But just trying to, I guess, fully understand the bigger picture a little bit, what goes into each of the sports that we do offer, and what all of those costs associated are, to kind of better understand the full picture.
So let me, I'll ask Mr. Bigelow and Dr. Gilson for some commentary, but let me offer a little bit of high level thought on this. And I would just advise everybody, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the parent of a football player, and I recognize that football is an expensive sport. I'm also a parent of a track athlete, which is a comparatively less expensive sport if you're not parking a bus at Reggie Lewis for a whole day on a Saturday. But there are varying costs associated with every sport. Somebody brought up earlier the number of competitions in a season. There are varying equipment costs. We struggled this year in football with scheduling, and as a result of that, played 2 games that were 2 hours away or more. And at some point, you do need to say, is this worth the return on investment? Right. And are the costs getting to the point that they are prohibitive? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think that those are fair questions to ask. And I think that to whatever extent we can bring additional transparency to this, I think we should. By the way, we have not really benefited from great transparency when it comes to athletic financing until very recently. Dr. Gilson and Mr. Bigelow deserve a lot of credit in providing the extraordinary increase in transparency that you've just seen today. That I can tell you, a year ago, 2 years ago, we just didn't have, and we didn't have the systems in place, or the work product going in to be able to provide that. But there's also another view here, which is, if you're going to offer all of the sports, and by the way, we don't offer all of the sports. We don't offer wrestling. There are other sports that are, competitive MIAA sports available that we could join that we don't offer. But if we were to, or just keep the ones that we have, I believe that the cost of the individual sport really shouldn't matter. And that we should be able to offer sports that appeal to as broad of a section of students as we possibly can. And when you start to get into differentiating those costs, what you're probably going to do is you are fulfilling, you are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy to end that sport, because it becomes too cost prohibitive for the families that are participating in it. And I can tell you that I heard from a teammate of my son's just within the last week that if these fees go into effect, they will not be able to participate next year. That's their assessment. So that's what we're up against. And I certainly feel that gravity being, 1/5 of the decision-making capacity on this thing. So these are admittedly very difficult decisions. Kevin, did you have any thoughts, particularly when it came to the differentiating sports costs?
Yeah, I totally agree. Every sport kind of carries its own, culture and necessary, track might have entry fees that another sport doesn't have, and vice versa. So I think you're right. I think when you get into that, and obviously I have a good idea of what every sport costs, but at the same time, I'm not trying to add any division between, the different sports, and I love, the fact that we offer what we offer. Can I just go back to the, and maybe I wasn't clear enough on Andrea's question before, but when we talk about the schedule, right, and you brought up how many, cross-country meets there are. And I know it's a little different for middle school, but when you get to the high school level, everything falls under the MIAA. So, and, there are limitations that we have to stay within, maximum game limitations. And we play to those in all of our sports. So, that, like, for instance, in football, you can only play one game a week. It's for a reason. It's for health of the student athlete, and so on and so forth. So it's similar in cross country. They can only run 2 consecutive days once, and then, running a meet on 3 consecutive days. But that's kind of where that schedule comes from.
Kevin, you brought up the MIAA effect here, and I just want, it was not covered as part of the presentation, but this is a topic that has been in front of the school committee multiple times over the course of the last few years, which is the MIAA safety requirements have changed considerably over the last few years. And there are certain sports where we used to have an EMT on the sideline, and there are some sports that now require somebody with a higher capacity, like a paramedic or a trainer, on both sidelines. And they vary from sport to sport, but those costs have increased considerably over the course of time that our current fee structure has been in place, which is what led the school committee to make the decision to budget for the trainer a couple of years ago. Not only does that bring an enormous additional service to our student athletes and help with their overall health and wellness and recovery time from injuries and those kinds of things, but it also helps us to accommodate some of those requirements that if we had not made that investment, Kevin would be spending most of his time chasing around trainers and paramedics to be on our sidelines. So again, an additional cost that we've absorbed that certainly was not accounted for to the level that we're currently supporting it, but is a extremely high cost associated with it. Okay, Thomas, thank you for being patient. I appreciate it. Could you share your question or comment?
Hi, thanks for having me. I know we just talked about it, but I'm curious on, I'm like big into numbers, obviously. But I would like to know if we could see the records of like what each sport's costing, because someone that's played 3 sports his whole life, I kind of know the difference of like what it cost me to buy a baseball bat or some basketball shoes, but compared to like football equipment, I know those numbers big play into big, and I know someone said like each sport costs different. I'm just trying to see what we're spending on each sport, because if someone like the person I mentioned earlier, if their daughter's only running 4 cross meets and it's only costing that student, um just a rough number, I don't really know, but like $200, but football's costing that person $500. It does make a huge difference for people that aren't playing those sports at that time.
Understood. And to the extent that we can add that level of transparency, we will.
And sorry, one more question. I come from a city where obviously the funding's different from a city to a town, but I know like even friends that still live in the cities, and when they win championships and stuff, they get like funding through them. Their kids don't play, they don't pay for any sports through the cities. I know it's obviously different through a town. What is, what are they getting on their end that their kids actually are not paying for anything, and we're we're paying higher taxes, we're paying overall higher education fees, and we're going to now higher sport fees.
Oh man, you just touched on my favorite topic. So several years ago, well, for decades, Massachusetts has partnered, I use air quotes, with local school districts when it comes to funding. And the mechanism that they partner with us on that funding is called Chapter 70. It's basically put into place by Mass General Law, Chapter 70, that was put in place eons ago. And a few years ago, they basically revised all of it under what is commonly known as the Student Opportunity Act. And the Student Opportunity Act has basically created additional funding for education, but also very complex formulas that determine what the state's contribution is going to be to each school district. And those formulas were really geared to flood the zone, so to speak, to use a sports metaphor, in what are known as the gateway cities. So cities like Fitchburg or Brockton or Lawrence have seen regular increases in their Chapter 70 funding since 2019, in double digits annually. And towns like Lunenburg and Townsend and Ashby, which are part of the North Middlesex region, which are in the process of closing schools as a result of this phenomenon, are seeing annual increases in their Chapter 70 funding of as low as 0.5% a year or two ago, to the current governor's proposal, which is driven by this funding, at 1.7% for next year. And so when you look at the inflation costs that Dr. Gilson has outlined, nearly 8% for busing, an average of 4% when it comes to salaries over the next 3 years, there's a gap. And what happens is that either the schools ask for more money to fill that gap from the town, and the town doesn't have the money because it's dealing with inflationary costs on the town side as well, or we have to cut costs, which we instituted some cuts last year, as a result of limited funds and cutbacks in federal spending, as well as fees. And you know, fees are, I mean, I hate to be blunt about it, but it's another revenue source, right? To offset these gaps. To answer your question directly, Thomas, they are getting substantially more funding per pupil. And they are expected to spend that money on education programs, on intervention, on achievement, but they do spend it in other areas, such as extracurriculars and sports and those kinds of things. It's a very unpleasant reality. I would tell you to contact Representative Kushmerek and Representative Scarsdale and Senator Cronin and let them know that we've been talking about this, because I can assure you they are hearing from me and the other members of the school committee certainly on this topic. But it is it's a really difficult, very difficult topic for Lunenburg right now.
And last question, and I'll make it quick. What are we gonna do? Like you said, a friend of your kids. What are we gonna do if more people start to back out of sports because of funding and it doesn't make up that price? Would it be would it be worth it to make more of a rise in pricing to get that number where it might scare people off?
Yeah, it's a very good comment, and you know, it's something that I think we need to look at. Okay. I think I've gotten my, at least in one fan. So I know some people are having difficulty with the raised hand feature. I think some people have certainly sent chat messages to me. I guess it's not all chat, they're just going to me. So I'm trying to get to those as best I can. I think I'm caught up, at least topically, if not with the individual questions. I'm going to go to TJ, and then I'll come back to Andrea if you have another question or comment.
Awesome.
Hey, TJ.
Hey, y'all. TJ here, 207 Rolling Acres Road. I have a few questions. Peter, I don't know. I'm happy to ask a few and then let Andrea roll in between, but I'll just start. I guess I'll start with the hard one that I don't think I saw discussed. Are there increases to youth sports fees for the rental and the youth sports side of things?
So that, so obviously we don't have domain over the fees or costs that the private organizations like
Correct.
youth baseball or football or whatever are charging for the kids.
Yes.
There is, I think, the beginnings of a proposal, Dr. Gilson, correct me if I'm wrong, to also revisit the fee structure for rentals of fields and facilities.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet in terms of figuring that out.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I don't think I saw a number for what the school uses from the omnibus budget for athletics. Do you have that number? Did I miss that?
We do have that number, but I am gonna have to get back to you on it. What we did, TJ, was we put all the coaches, we're really looking at how we fund our revolving account. The athletic budget is funded from the local budget and the revolving account. The big point to make is that what was being paid out of the revolving account is not supportable for the long haul. And that's why we need to look at how we're funding. For example, we put all the transportation costs back into the local budget, because doing like 40% in the local budget and expecting the revolving account to fund transportation at 60%, it wasn't cutting it. And that's why we were going into deficit. Similarly with the coaches' salaries, we were trying to expect the user fees to offset all the coaching stipends. That wasn't working. So we put all the coaches' salaries back in the local budget. Realistically, what we think we can do is fund out of the user fees. We may be able to fund all of the officials, and then the other thing that we're continuing to look at, we've got to continue to monitor this because inflation is continuing to, prices are continuing to go up. And we're just trying to present a realistic and responsible budget for every kid, for every program, including athletics, and just be able to really be comprehensive about both academic programming and athletic programming.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'll let Andrea step in for a second. What I was getting at was, with like a 2.5% increase on the budget every year, and I think I saw that it costs what did I see? 500K or so. Yeah, 512 to run
Yeah,
that program.
512. Right.
Yeah.
With
So
the,
I'm
and that's
thinking
the-
2.5% of some big number, not covering the costs of the increase in, say, coaching fees. So that's really why I was asking about how much goes into the budget, because that number's bigger than what the user fees cover. And so the annual increase, why isn't that covering that difference? Because it should be a bigger number than user fees. But I have another question, but Andrea has been waiting. So
I get it. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Andrea. Thanks,
Sorry,
TJ.
it's not even really a question because you were just asking for ideas, and then you were talking about we don't even offer all of the sports that some of the other schools do. And I was just wondering, would it make more sense to have more teams so that kids who have different interests would be paying more user fees instead of increasing the user fees for the small amount of students that do play sports? I don't know, like, would it?
Yeah.
Why don't we offer?
It's a fair question. I think, one is you have to look at the capacity of the staff and the facilities to support them, which we're, I think, right now at our limit when it comes to our facilities. Unless it was something that could be done indoors in the spring or fall or outdoors in the winter, just because of our facility capacity. Beyond that, the school committee does look at participation numbers every season. The athletic director brings a report, and we do look at participation. And by and large, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the participation numbers have been rather flat over the last few years. We did see a nice jump right post-COVID, but I think we've been flat to slightly down the last year or two. I think the biggest problem that I would think through is when you add a sport, you only have so many kids. We have 400 and some odd kids in our school, about a little over half of which participate in athletics. You're going to dilute that pool. And the MIAA does not calculate how many sports you offer when determining what division to put you in competitively. It's based on the number of boys or number of girls that you have in your school. And so one of the challenges is the more you offer, it becomes dilutive, and that affects your overall competitiveness and therefore the overall esprit de corps and success and sense of accomplishment that the kids get out of the sports themselves. This is a big topic that came up when we added soccer 30 years ago. Believe it or not, I'm a longtime townie. I was in the schools when that happened. And 10 or so years ago when we added lacrosse, like those are the topics that came up at the time. Now, over the years, we also lost tennis, and there have been other things that have come and gone as different sports have become popular or less popular.
Right. So I guess my last thing, sorry, just being like new to the middle school and coming in, my kids just love sports and they love to be in activities. And I found the information a little bit difficult to find coming in the middle school. Like, I don't mean to be offensive or anything, but just signing up, finding more about the programs is hard. And I know like some of the other families that I talked to were like, oh, we would have joined, but we missed the tryouts, or like just not knowing or having it be advertised. I feel like maybe participation could go up a little bit in the existing sports if incoming middle school students knew how to have access to the programs, because I didn't really know where to find that coming into the school from Turkey Hill.
That's
That's-
an awesome comment, and we need to do a better job. So, point taken. I can tell you, my son and I, this is one of my, I get to take an opportunity to brag here, but my son is a standout athlete, particularly in track. And the reason why he got into the track program was because somebody who was a phys ed teacher saw him in the gym one day with me and encouraged him to participate in track. And he'll probably play that sport in college. And we need to do a better job at communicating and encouraging our entire population to participate in these programs. Okay, I'm going to jump over back to Chris Martins, and then I'll come to Chris Sullivan, and then we'll probably wrap up very shortly. So if you have a question, put your hand up or a comment.
All
Chris
right,
Martins?
I just have two quick things. First of all, I noticed on your sheet that we collected about $8,500 in door fees or whatever you want to call them.
Gate. Yep.
Yeah, gate fees. Thank you. Do we charge at every sport? I know softball and baseball you don't charge. I mean, it would be almost impossible to charge trying to get into Marshall Park. But do we charge at all the basketball games, hockey games, football games? Because $8,500 seems pretty small to me for the amount of people that probably go and watch these games. I think if I split it out, I'm assuming we charge $5 a ticket. I split that out. It's like 1,700 attendance, but I don't know how many people would go to every single. I mean, there's 3 seasons of sports. I know, once again, I don't know if we charge for soccer games and field hockey games, stuff like that.
Kevin?
Yeah, we charge for all night games that require staff around those, right? So if we have an announcer, et cetera, we're charging for those sports. Hockey, because they are not fully funded, they handle their own gate because a lot of that goes back to their ice fees. And my first year, so 2 years ago here, I did try charging in the spring, but it just didn't make sense with having to hire staff and what we were bringing in. So last year we did not charge in the spring.
Okay.
And you're correct. Like, even we have trouble even, at our current facility on the turf, maintaining a perimeter to be able to charge and get everybody that comes through the door, just because of the nature of the setup.
Yeah, I mean, I know my daughter runs track also, so I know when I go to Reggie Lewis Center, it costs me $10 to watch 9 seconds of sprinting. But
Brutal.
$5 to watch a football game, I don't think is that bad. I don't know if you consider raising the price. But I guess my other question is, and I don't know if this has always been a town rumor, if this is actually something that actually came to fruition, but when they were building new schools, there was a rumor going around that we rented out light tower space to the wireless cell phone companies, and they put towers in there, and they gave us a certain amount of money per year to maintain the fields. Is that still in place? And do we actually utilize that money to maintain the fields? Does that offset some of the maintenance that we do on the fields?
That's a great question. So Dr. Gilson can comment on where that money goes, but the original intent of that deal was to help to offset the loan, the bond that we took for the turf field, not necessarily for the maintenance of that field. Now,
That is skill.
we don't have another 3 hours for me to talk about the field and the plan and my hopes and dreams for fixing that situation. But that deal was really to pay for the field. And we need to replace that field and do some construction in that area to deal with the deterioration that has occurred because of the drainage problems on the hill. And we're looking at exploring that and other revenue sources to help offset those costs as well. But that's a long story.
Yeah, it is. But right now, I mean, that is the condition. We're still paying off the turf field. And we have a bit more to go on the payout for that.
Okay, Chris Sullivan and then TJ, and then we'll wrap up. Oh, before you jump in, somebody asked about where one can get to the slides and the information that Dr. Gilson provided. I'm going to put in the chat a link to the presentation that was posted after the school committee meeting on
Sure.
8th of January.
Yeah.
There are some additional slides that Dr. Gilson has added, and I think we can probably get them posted, and we'll get a link out on SportsU. Chris.
Yeah, the only question I had, I know we do have towns around us that don't have fees, and if we talk to them, like wondering if we're talking to them at all to figure out what are they doing that allows them to not have fees and still run a sports program. And I don't know if that feeds into what we touched upon Chapter 70, and so I don't know if it's that, or if there's other avenues or other things that are being done that are different things that we should look at.
So I would suggest that probably everything that Peter talked about with Chapter 70 and the Student Opportunity Act and cities all plays a factor into that. And the bottom line is, without user fees, there is more that has to be absorbed by the local budget. And the challenge is that our local budget is really strained, and it's getting tougher and tougher to support the costs of inflation for the program, the educational program, so that all students are receiving a really high quality education program. And that is, I mean, ultimately, you need to have school for all students, and we need to be providing a quality program. So that's the challenge.
The only other thing I would just bring up and just to keep in mind would be there's a lot of strong booster programs here in Lunenburg.
Yep.
If I'm being blunt, those booster programs are supported by the same parents that are going to pay these athletic fees. So when the soccer team has a calendar raffle, more often than not, it's the parent that's buying 10 calendars for another $100 to support the athletic program and support the boosters and so forth. So there are like just some outside things, and I know that that goes into the booster budget, which is supporting our various athletes in whatever ways the boosters do, but just something that I would keep in the back of your minds as you're making these decisions, because it's not only are we talking about an increase in athletic fees, which again I understand it has to happen, looking at the numbers into it, but I think just to keep in mind that those same parents that are going to pay an increased athletic fee are also typically the ones that are putting a significant amount of money into the booster program as well. So,
yep, that is a very good point, Chris. All right, I see A. King, who you've also sent me a couple of chat messages, so I will I'll save reading your messages. You can ask your questions, or if you'd like me to read your messages, but I'll give you the floor.
So Peter, this is Amy King.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. I did just put into the chat for you, you go to other towns, and especially, Leominster comes to mind, is that they have sponsorship at their games. There's ad revenue that's coming in to help support, I assume, the athletic budget or the rental of the field. Other towns also seem to have ads with sponsorship from local businesses. Do we look at that for a revenue source at all?
Yeah. So I can tell you that has come up just very ad hoc to me, standing on sidelines over the last couple of years. I don't know that that's something that we have taken on as a school committee to seriously look at, and I think it's an excellent suggestion. We currently have a policy in place that prohibits it, but I know a few people that might be able to look at that policy. And I think that's a very good suggestion.
And then the other comment I had put in the chat is that if, as we consider changing the fee structure, I know one thing that has been a concern for many families is, I think that if I recall correctly, if you have a middle school student, your middle school second, third child is capped there, your high school is separate, that if you were to put the middle school and the high school together, that might be helpful to families. Doesn't help us raise more money, but many families have both middle school and high school athletes. So to look at that as one bucket for that graduated fee structure for family members might be helpful.
We are doing that, Anne. It's not the separate buckets anymore. It would be looking at 7 through 12 and the family cap be for 7th grade through 12th grade as a whole.
Good. Doesn't affect me anymore, but it affects a lot.
I'm sure it does. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. TJ, you get the last swing of the bat.
All right. I like that analogy, Peter. Good one. So just some observations that I was trying to do. So back to my 2.5% question, I realized even if the local budget is 300K, I mean, that's still only 7,500, allowed, right? So it's still relatively small for what it's worth. But then on the other end, what I was noticing, Ms. Gilson, you said, I think it was 254,000 would be the total that you would pull in after the fees were increased. That's not with any kind of loss factor in there, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah, I see you say right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to to be frank, it's a projection, TJ.
Yeah.
And honestly, we looked at every kind of data that we had from last year, and trends suggest that our low-income students are increasing, and so we tried to do a reasonable approximation.
Oh, so that 254K assumes some amount of.
No, it does not.
It does not. Okay.
It does not, but
I
in
see.
terms of, right, it does not.
Yeah, so
Because
that's what
we had to look at thresholds. What's the maximum
Right.
we could bring in with at the cost of the new with the institution of the new fees,
So not to misspread information, because this is totally back of the napkin math here, but just
Yeah.
projecting that 30% loss that I think was the loss from the current number. It looks like the total could be 177 at the end of it, up from 133, assuming I'm doing this math right.
Yeah.
Meaning like the net difference of this to the school system is 40K. Which I just find to be an interesting number for us all to understand.
Yes.
So the hard question that I really wanted to ask was, what does this avoid, right? Like, I know this is about the revolving account. Does this avoid any cuts if we do this? Like, does this protect the athletic program from the upcoming budget season at all?
So let me.
You want to go ahead, Peter?
Let me jump in on this. Yeah. And truth be told, Dr. Gilson and I had a conversation earlier today anticipating this question. The truth of the matter, TJ, is we don't know. This all kind of goes into the mix of the budget, and ultimately we need to come to something. But we don't know. We don't really have a detailed proposal from the superintendent yet. You were at the meeting last week, and you know the deal. We don't know. And we will be as communicative as we can in a relatively compressed amount of time to get this budget done, but we don't know.
So does that mean that the effect of this is to keep the revolving account green? That's really the balance that.
No. I mean, I think that while that is a measurable, some other measurables are, it could make things less bad. Back to your previous question, right? So, but again, I can't tell you to what degree of less bad we actually mean, right? So I know I'm not giving you a straight answer because I don't have one.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying. I think Ms. Gilson, you said it was 26% was funded by user fees, right? And I thought you said that the 50, I think you said targeting 150 keeps it at 26%, right? That was what you said.
I'd have to, I'm not looking, the presentation's not in front of me right now, but but, we considered what the expenses were last year and then tried to project ahead on top of that if we were
Mhm.
going to, institute the $75 fee upward.
We're
increase.
also, just to be clear, we're looking at 24 actuals versus 26 projected.
Right.
Current year that we're in is not like
Yeah,
there's
of course,
there's a
yeah.
gap there, right?
Right.
Yeah, we still don't have spring sports and all that. Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Right, and the year's not over, so we won't
Yep.
truly know how we've done until we get to the end of the season with at the end of the spring season and into the summer. So one of the things that I would recommend is that we annually review the data associated with each year and how the athletic revolving account is doing. Because it would, I don't think the ideal would be to keep it green, because ideally it would be great to get the revolving amount spent down to zero to be responsible. And so part of that transition, we were just finding that if we were trying to expect the revolving account to completely pay for coaching salaries and about 60% of transportation and officials, that was not going to be realistic. So we
Yeah.
had to change our strategy to be realistic in what the user fees can bring in, and what the gate receipts can bring in, and and then go from there. So that's why it's not just a one and done conversation. It will be one that we continue to move forward with and keep thinking about. And so I appreciate everybody's comments tonight. I
Yeah,
really
I just want to offer, I made him, well, I lied. Leah Jacobs chatted me and she had a problem with the hand raised. So I'm going to call on her for the last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, thank you. So I'm the one who had asked the question about the grant earlier, and my question is, I remember during the override discussions last year, there was talk about possibly bringing on a grant writer or somebody who could source out grants. I don't know, admittedly, I don't know if we've been able to find anybody that does that. On my end, a quick Google search shows some grants that seem available in Massachusetts for athletics. Are they viable? I have no idea. I'm also not a grant writer, so I wouldn't be able to, to really source that out. But that's my question. Moving
Yeah.
forward, not that I think that this would be a quick fix this year, but it potentially could help us out. Knowing that we now have, what you mentioned, 30% low-income families. That's a concerning number. That is going to take away from the potential
Yeah.
fees that we have. It happens that we have to figure it out. But if we had the option of a grant that might offset some of those costs, it seems helpful. So moving forward, would we have anybody who could source those out for us?
Yeah, so let me address your and you did remember correctly, Leah, about the grant writing position. So that was a position that was funded by the town, suggested by the finance committee for $50,000 for grant writing services. Unfortunately, with the departure of the town manager, to the best of my knowledge, that proposal never really came to fruition, and I don't know what the status is of those funds and if they have been put to work. We did make an inquiry on the capital planning committee, actually, about potentially utilizing some of those services to look at some federal programs associated with capital items like emergency, like fire department equipment and that sort of thing. But to my knowledge, we never ran that to ground. And I think it's a very good point and one that I can try to get an answer on. I think I should be able to get to it rather quickly. We were asked, I seem to recall during the summer, like, what are some of the things that we can go look at through this grant writing service? But I think this transition from the old town manager, the interim town manager, and I'm hopeful that a contract is being negotiated as we speak, with a new permanent incoming town manager, that we can actually put some of those ideas to work.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to thank you all once again for your participation, questions, and commentary. This meeting has been recorded and notes have been taken, and it will be reported back to the school committee. We have a meeting Wednesday, but I think this is actually an agenda item for next week. We will be also having a follow-on conversation or another version of this conversation next Tuesday at the same time, 6 o'clock. So if you have friends who might have missed out on this one and want to direct them to this type of forum, please share that information, and we look forward to your repeated participation. Not only here, by the way, but come to school committee meetings. We like an audience, and we like your ideas and commentary. So you're always welcome, and thank you very much once again.
Thanks all.
All right.
Cheers.
With that, we're going to adjourn the meeting and shut this thing down. So thank you very much, Dr. Gilson and Mr. Bigelow.
Thank you.